You're listening to The Tales We Tell, a podcast about spooky stories, unsolved mysteries, and local lore. I'm your host, Hannah Parch.
And I'm Katy.
Welcome back! It's our normal time again, except slightly earlier. I hope everyone is surviving the heat if you're also going through a horrible summer.
Gosh, the temperature gauge on the truck driving home today, especially like in Raleigh and all the way through to home, was in the hundreds. It was like 101 at one point.
I was going to say, we went downtown and had like a few drinks. So we were down there for maybe 2 hours. And when we got back in the car, the temperature gauge on my car is at 111. And I was like, get out of here, Subaru.
You know who I feel really bad for, though?
Dogs who have neglectful owners.
Oh, well, okay. Take it there. I was talking about people who live in places like Phoenix.
Oh. Yeah.
Where, like, there were summers, this is several years ago now, I would see reports of literally people's trash cans were melting.
Ooh, yeah.
And, like, everything was so, like, unbearably hot. Like, people weren't able to get to work because they couldn't get into their cars because their cars were too hot.
No.
Like, you had to use an oven mitt, basically, to get into your car.
Ugh.
And I think there was problems with, like, cars not starting because it was too hot or, and then that was a couple of years ago. I can only imagine it's gotten worse because it's definitely gotten worse here.
Yeah.
Twice, I think it was, or maybe it was last week and maybe the week before, I was out at one place downtown and I noticed, I was like, walked into the bathroom. I was like, I feel like all the lights are kind of not flickering, but like kind of dimming and coming back.
Oh, yeah.
And then I was like, that's weird. Maybe it's just, like the AC kicked on and, it does that like power draw thing. And then it did it again a little while later. I was like, I need to finish up here and get out before the power goes out. And sure enough, like as I'm reaching for the handle on the bathroom to open the door, the lights went out and I was like, oh. No. And I walk out into the bar, and most of the lights are still on, but some of them are off. And I'm like...
You're like, hurry!
No, the bartender was like, you have like a partial power outage? I'm just like, yep, I know. I saw it go. I saw it on its way out. I saw it go. And then there was somewhere else I was recently. The power never went out, but like there was several times it was, doing that dimming thing, like... It's just the power grid couldn't support all of the draw of power from everyone running their ACs. Like, that's what it's got to be.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, the good news is we're sort of halfway done with summer. So I told myself to my therapist.
No, we're halfway done with July, which is a bad month.
I know.
We still have to survive August.
But
July and August are the worst.
At the end of August, aka the first week of September, I think
my birthday.
Well, yes, obviously. But also it's technically when football season starts.
Actually, I think technically my birthday is the second week of September.
Yeah, get over it.
It's the first day of the second week.
Okay. My announcements, as I mentioned off mic, are somewhat irrelevant, but I just wrote them down so that I could say them. My first one is my life-changing purchase that I made this weekend that I would like everyone to know about. I've been on a cleaning kick and it has improved my life. Cleaning has improved my life and my mood greatly.
Oh, it does big time. I mean, that's why the whole Marie Kondo lifestyle took off for so long, and then now it's like the home edit is the thing.
Oh my gosh. Well, let me just say
I love both of those.
Yes.
By the way,
I don't follow Marie Kondo, but I follow the home edit.
Same.
Let me just say, just buy the correct things that you need. Even if you just do it. That was the thing that made the difference this weekend is I finally was just like, I'm just going to buy the various cleaning products that I feel like I need. So I got like a stainless steel cleaner that has made all the difference. I got a degreaser. I don't know why I didn't have one of those before. I've been cleaning my entire kitchen with this oven degreaser because my whole kitchen is covered in grease. Okay, but the thing I need everyone to go buy is called mold armor. I got it at Lowe's. It was $8, which is a lot, but Katie, to me, that's a lot for a single bottle of cleaning product.
I mean, it depends on how much is in the cleaning product.
Well, let me just tell you, I don't know if you've ever looked up when you're in our bathroom, but we would get mold on our ceilings.
Makes sense. We get mildew on the shower curtain a lot.
This is a spray it and walk away product. You don't even have to scrub. I'm sure in some instances you do. I literally just sprayed our ceiling and walked away, and 10 minutes later, there's literally no mold. And it kills it. It doesn't just I'm so excited. I'm bringing it to the Outlander house because I'm going to drench all the windows. Oh my gosh, I love it so much. I might
need it for our windows.
I sprayed our bathtub because we got that little pink ring around the... And you just spray it and leave and walk and go about your business. Oh my gosh. It's changed my life.
Not a sponsor.
Not a sponsor, but Mold Armor, if you want to sponsor me, I'm going to be buying your product.
Hey, and as a housewife, I'll test it.
Do it. I'm going to make you go run your finger along my windowsills in the kitchen too, because I have been degreasing those.
You need to be taking before and after photos, my friend.
I know. I really should. I should have done that with the refrigerator too, because that was the main reason I got the stainless steel wipes. Oh, it looks amazing.
Speaking of stainless steel and cleaning, we have a stainless steel sink, and despite it being stainless steel,
dumb name
there was still a couple of like stains, like rust stains almost. Like they were very light, and there was just like, it just kind of looked dirty and grungy. And so I looked up, I'm like, what are some like good way to get the stains off of stainless steel? And
the internet said there are no stains on stainless steel.
no. Pinterest came through for me because of course. And so I ended up cutting a lime in half.
Ooh.
And then just kind of tapping, placing it in a bowl of some baking soda and then just scrubbing that on the sink.
Nice.
My sink sparkled when I was done with it. It looked so good.
I love the adult things where we're like, next time I come to your house and be like, oh, let me look at your sink. And I'm like, after we record, you have to go feel my windowsills. And then my last irrelevant announcement is I found a show on Netflix called The Last Czars. Have you seen it? Oh,
no,
man.
I've seen that it exists, but the only thing I've seen on Netflix as of late is Go Dog Go, the Paw Patrol movie, and Smurfs.
Okay, so I don't know if you've heard this story or not. I feel like I'd heard of it, but that was it. Also, I will say I could not find very many articles or like just online written information about it, but several podcasts have covered it, and they've covered it, at least the two that I listened to were interviews with the person. So like first hand information. So the two podcasts I listened to are Astonishing Legends. Very good. I don't know why I don't listen to them regularly. And That UFO podcast, which I want to plug because number one, the host is Scottish. So it's like a Scottish podcast. So like, so if you love listening to a Scottish accent, do it. But then also in this interview, the person who I'll tell you his name in a second, who is being interviewed, his cat is being adorably obnoxious in the background like the whole time.
Like the Weatherman cat.
Yes. He's just like, and it's great because they don't acknowledge it except for like one time. But that cat is like like all up in the background doing its own thing.
Very interested in the microphone or just stuffed in the room?
I don't know if he locked himself in the room with the cat or what, but like that cat is active. Okay, so there's also a book written about this, and it's called The Incident at Devil's Den. Okay, so this is the story of Terry Lovelace. You heard of him at all? No.
I mean, I've heard the last name before in different situations, and also because it is still July, put it in reverse, Terry.
Terry
is still fresh in my mind.
Yes. Okay. Well, so obviously because it was on that UFO podcast,
it's clearly a UFO or abduction story.
Yes, it is. All right. Well, your first picture is of Terry, if you would like to see current him and 1977 him, which is when our story will be taking place.
Aw, thank you.
I know, you little cutie.
Little military uniform. The Air Force?
Air Force, yep.
I feel like most of the UFO stories involving any kind of military personnel is
Air Force.
Air Force.
Because UFOs be in the air.
Sometimes they hover just above the ground. Who's in charge of that?
That's true.
I mean, I guess it's still technically in the air.
Still in the air. Well, now we have Space Force, so...
Don't mind me.
Okay, so Terry was born in 1950. He grew up in St. Louis, Missouri, and he was active duty in the U.S. Air Force from 1973 to 1979, where he worked as a medic and EMT for the emergency room at Whitman Air Force Base Hospital in western Missouri. After his military service, he practiced as a felony prosecutor. He served...
That's an interesting jump.
Yes.
I mean, I feel like most people who work in any kind of a medical position within the military are typically like doing that kind of like as a way to fund their medical school, like medical training and whatnot, and typically end up in the medical field in some way.
Yes.
Especially since there is a a legal branch too within the military. If he wanted to practice law, you feel like he would have gone with that route.
Yeah.
Military police or even...
It's weird. And all I can say is that, like, this does give him a pretty, like... I don't want to say credible background, but, like, he's not...
He's clearly,
he's very smart. He's very intelligent.
He sounds smart, and he also well-rounded, too, in a way.
Yes,
or like
that's the word.
Yeah.
So he practiced as a felony prosecutor. He also served as an assistant attorney general for the U.S. Territory of American Samoa. And he also served as a state's attorney for Vermont's Board of Medical Practice. So those are just his, like, credentials. Okay, so rewind.
All that medical background probably helped.
Yeah.
Helped there because he could understand the jargon.
Yeah, he's like, I'm going to combine both of my careers now. Okay, so we're going to rewind to June 11th of 1977. Terry is 22, just a little baby. And I think that's how old he was when that picture was taken that I showed you. So, Terry and his best friend, Toby, name has been changed. Toby was also an EMT. They were BFFs, and they decide that they're going to go camping. Mind you, neither of them had been camping before, and they were not outdoorsy people, but they were just like, we should go camping.
Well, I guess it is the Air Force.
Yeah.
I was like, how are you in the military for 2 years? Or no, I'm sorry. It was 77. How are you in the military for 4 years?
Yeah. Yep.
Haven't been camping.
I don't know. I think probably they hadn't been
The answer,
camping,
I think, is Air Force.
Yeah. And, like, they had not probably ever voluntarily gone camping for fun. So.
Yeah, because, I mean, don't worry. I understand that, Army camping, Marine camping is vastly different than camping.
Yes.
But there's still enough of the basic same principles that...
Yeah. And here's the thing, and I get it. It was 1977, and, like, the Earth hadn't quite started its descent into hell, but, like, it's the middle of June, and you're like, let's go camping.
Well, where is this?
Missouri?
The Ozarks.
Yeah, okay, but still,
I mean, unless they're in, like, the Plains area, then...
They were near... Well, okay, so... Toby picked where they were going to go, which is Devil's Den State Park.
All right. Can I Google?
Yes. It's technically in Arkansas.
Okay.
And I believe it is next to like Ozark National Forest, maybe. It's a 2,500 acre area, and it was on Google Maps. It says a 4-hour drive, but they said it was a 6-hour drive. But it was not close, which again, if you're going camping for like whatever, to each their own, but if I'm going camping, I want to be like a quick, like no more than an hour away from like the comforts of home.
Oh, yeah. So more or less where they are.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, let's see. Lots of trees.
Yes.
So, yeah, June in a place like that would not be a bad time to go camping at all.
Well, maybe
it's kind of more hilly, I believe, and
yes,
lots of trees.
I was gonna say,
and also it was the 70s.
And spoiler, the weather is not. The weather is the least of their concerns during this camping trip.
I mean, otherwise it wouldn't be.
It wouldn't be on this podcast.
on our podcast.
So they purchased like a small little 2-person tent. They packed 2 air mattresses. They like borrowed supplies from people. They borrowed blankets from the hospital to take with them. Like whatever. They make their 6-hour drive to the park, and they get there, and Terry said that he was going to go like register them, and Toby was like, no, let's not register, because then they'll put us in a campground and there'll be other people around us, and if we're going to do this, let's have like the real experience.
So he wanted to kind of backpack in a way.
Yes, he didn't want to be around other people. So Terry was like, okay, let's just completely break the rules and do that. So they drive.
Sounds like a 22-year-old's thought process, for sure.
Yes.
I mean, I'm not going to question it too much either and be like, yeah, I wouldn't want to be around a bunch of people either. Like there's campground camping, and there's nothing wrong with it. I love going to, like even primitive campgrounds at a campground is not that primitive.
Yeah.
I've been straight up backpacking, and that's fun. Like, it's all fun.
You can do it either way.
It's all fun. And so I would 100% be like, yeah, let's do some backpacking. But at the same time, like, I would be like, somebody needs to know where we're going.
Yes. And in 1977, and for legal
especially
reasons,
since there's no cell phones then, like, even though there's cell phones, and if I'm going somewhere, like, anytime I go kayaking, I file a float plan with somebody, even though, like, I'm doing it recreationally or whatever.
Still.
I'm like, I anticipate having cell service 100% of the time, but hey, hey, Hannah, just so you know, I am launching at this site. I am at this time. I am taking out at this site. I anticipate it'll be this long. But if you don't hear from me, you know where to start looking.
Yes. For legal purposes, we are not encouraging anyone to go into the restricted area of a state park.
God, no.
But that's what they do.
That's so dumb.
They find some back roads. They literally get to a place where there's a chain up, and they just like undo the chain and go back there. But they find a nice secluded area that I believe is a plateau. I think your second picture is a map of where they ended up camping. Let me make sure. I did look at these before. Okay, perfect.
Oh, a mesa.
Yeah. So they find this nice place, and Terry's like, oh, this is beautiful. This is this nice big open valley. Let's camp right in the middle so we have this great view. And Toby insisted that they camp off to the side closer to the trees, and he couldn't give a reason for why he wanted to do that, but
so far it seems like Toby has more of an agenda to this camping trip than he's letting on.
And he had more of an agenda than he realized he had. So they get to their campsite that they have chosen. The very first thing they did was went on a hike before they set up anything. And they like went on this big hike. They found this nice, I don't know, clearing with some rocks that were nice and cool. And they both laid down and then accidentally fell asleep. And they woke up with barely enough time to get back to their campsite to like set up camp before it got dark.
Yeah, 100%. Go off on a hike and wear yourself out. And I'm not even touching the whole falling asleep part. But yeah, no. Don't set up camp first while you've got light and energy to do so.
Yeah.
Also, people who have never been camping before and probably don't know how to set up tents and stuff, you probably need to allot some extra time for figuring that out.
Yes, agreed. Anyways, they get back and they set up their tent and they blow up their air mattresses and they make a campfire and they hang out by the fire and they're talking and it's very nice and peaceful and they have this nice breeze and it's just a nice night. And at some point...
Well, it's camping, and unless they've got like bears actively attacking your campsite or a big like thunderstorm, camping is generally very nice.
Which another reason not to go into restricted areas is bears. They don't.
Bears also don't follow restricted area guidelines.
Well,
bears go where bears want to go.
Just saying.
Same with other like apex predators like that. I've told you about the time that I was camping years and years ago with a boyfriend and like it was in Louisiana, so it was like a more swampy, like a swampland campsite where our campsite was more or less kind of stalked by an alligator.
Oh, jeez.
So yeah, it was at night and we were sitting by the fire finishing up dinner. Just, sitting around the fire, talking. It was a nice night. We were having a nice time. Everything was just nice.
Yeah.
And we hear this like kind of like crunching noise clearly someone or something walking through like the wooded-ish area around or like just through leaves and sticks. And I'm like, okay. It's dark. And the pace it was going was slow. Like it was just kind of like, like ambling its way through the woods around just the edge, and it was the edge of our campsite where there was like more like dense vegetation and everything. And it's like, okay, well, first, a person wouldn't be walking through that because this was a primitive campsite at a campground, and there were other, there weren't many people around, but there was, clearly marked walking trails, and there was a paved road. Like, people aren't walking there. We're like, okay, so some sort of animal is moving slowly. It also sounds like it's big. Like, you can tell the difference between, like, oh, a squirrel just ran through the leaves versus, like you see Kelly chasing a squirrel. The squirrel runs through the leaves, and it's like a little... And then Kelly goes... Da, 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 da. I'm like, okay, it sounds big. It sounds low to the ground, too. Like, I don't know how we could tell that. I don't know if it was just our imaginations fully taking over on that.
Or because you were in the Louisiana swamp.
And again, like that information fueling our imaginations. But I'm like, I wonder if that's an alligator. Like, it just sounds big and low to the ground, and it's just slowly, like that slow walk that alligators do. And it just kind of like went around the perimeter of our campsite and kept on going. We're like, okay. And then a little while later, it started coming back.
Oh, gosh. Well, he had to run an errand, and now he's coming back.
He wanted to go see who all was around. And I was like, okay, well, there's not many other people around, and I think I smelled some food over here. Ooh. And I remember, like, we stopped talking, and, like, all we could hear was the fire crackling and the debris crunching. And I remember catching a glimpse of an eye.
Oh, no.
Like, just that nighttime, the fire caught its eye, and I was like, there's definitely something there. Like, we're not just hearing things.
Yeah.
It's not like sticks just randomly falling in a path because like, the sound was moving.
Yeah.
And that's about the time that we scrambled up on top of the picnic table, and I was like, no, it could get us up here. And so we went ahead and like hopped in the car we're sitting in the car finishing our dinner. I'm like Googling more information on alligators' habits, just to like either talk myself out of like maybe it was a raccoon that was just kind of like, you guys got any good eats? Because that would be also low to the ground.
Yeah.
I felt like it didn't make enough noise for it to be a raccoon. Like it just the noise was too much. It sounded like, and that's when I discovered that alligators actually, I think, can run at like kind of like cheetahs. They can have a top speed, but it's a short-lived top speed. But alligators can run at like 30 miles an hour.
Oh my gosh, that's so fast.
I don't remember. Like it's been years, but it was basically they could run at a speed that was much faster than I could run.
And you think of them as being slow on land because they're fast in the water.
Yeah. And because they're just so big and low to the ground.
Yeah, and freaking dinosaurs. Ooh. I hate that story.
All right. Yeah, alligators can run up to 35 miles per hour on the land.
Oh my gosh. That's so fast.
But their sprinting speeds are usually between 9.5 and 20 miles per hour.
Oh, only 9.5 and 20?
I don't know if I could run 9.5 miles
I'm like trying to think of what
even for a few seconds.
I know. I'm trying to think of what the top speed on like a treadmill is that I could ever sustain. Which, spoiler, I don't do cardio. And so it's not a lot. It's very slow. That's terrifying. However, I
had to look it up because I was like, I thought I remembered it being at 30 and like, but that just seems absurd. But I also remember when I looked it up, I was like, that's absurd.
That is insane. Ugh. Okay, well, I want you to picture yourself back at the campsite. Shouting.
I was there as I was telling that story. I was there. I could hear the fire crackling. I could hear the alligator creeping along the outside edge of I was convinced that night that I was going to wake up in the middle of the night and there was going to be something pressed up against me.
Stop it.
It was going to be that alligator just like laying outside of the tent.
Oh, no.
Up against me for my body warmth because he's a reptile.
Yeah.
So they seek heat from other sources.
I heard that.
I thought he was going to be trying to like, oh, you're warm. Let's snuggle.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so you're back at the campsite. You've got the sound of the alligator, but suddenly you notice that everything has gone quiet. So this is what Terry notices. The sounds of bugs, sounds of frogs, the wind, everything has stopped. Similar to in our time slip episode, where you just suddenly notice that nothing is moving. And
that's the creepiest.
It's so creepy.
Sound. Especially if you're out in the woods.
Oh.
Like the woods, people are always like, oh, I love the woods. They're so quiet and peaceful. No.
The
woods are loud as
and they should be. If they're not loud, you should be concerned.
Yes. Especially at night. Like, I don't know how late at night this was, but like dusk, that is the dusk and like early morning. The only time that quiet is acceptable is like midday.
Yeah.
When it is hot and everything is like, I'm chilling in the shade. I'm not doing anything. I'm conserving my energy. You might hear there'll definitely be some bugs buzzing around.
Yeah. And honestly,
probably not hearing much.
Now that I'm thinking about it, one of those things that like I think as someone from the South who never experiences snow, but one of the things I think makes snow so like magical is
the quiet,
the stillness and the quiet of just like, if it's not actively snowing and it's just like everything's dampened and still
muffled.
Muffled, yes. So that's not the case here. It's the middle of June. Terry remembered staring at a leaf on a nearby tree and thinking like, okay, it's going to move, just a tiny bit at least while I'm staring at it. Like, to kind of convince himself that this was just like a lull in the wind or whatever. It never moved while he was looking at it. And then
the world was a freeze frame.
Yes.
Somebody hit the pause button, but they forgot to pause.
And then Toby pointed out in the distance at 3 lights and said, hey, have those lights been there this whole time? So they, as Terry describes them, they were all as bright as the North Star, and they were in the shape of a triangle. And as they're looking at it, the triangle shape begins to tumble and also come closer to them. And as it came closer, it became clear that these lights were part of a craft. Also, during this time, Terry says that he felt this sense of calmness, almost like a sedation. And he recognized that this was like an inappropriate way to feel, but like he couldn't help it. It
was almost as if he was drugged in a way.
Yeah. He described it as like that sensation you get before you're put under, like for surgery, where it's just kind of like, I'm conscious, but like I don't really care about anything.
I was trying to think of the last like surgery that I had. That was years ago, like years and years ago. But I was like, well, I did have an epidural only like 2.5 years ago, and it wasn't putting me under, but it was definitely in like the middle of like a traumatic process, like a natural process.
Yeah, but traumatic.
Traumatic.
Yeah.
And I was literally cracking jokes in the middle of it. Like I was cool as a cucumber while there was a person halfway out of me.
We all react differently to.
I'm also a special breed, and like I've been through some stuff, and so that's just how I cope is humor at inappropriate times.
Yay.
And dick jokes.
Those are the best kinds.
Apparently, according to our live episode.
And according to several episodes we've done. To be fair.
It's become a thing.
Yeah, and to be fair, if you're talking about 12-inch scars on legs, or I'm trying to think of the other thing. I think it was
a 6-inch blade, and we're like, okay.
It was a 6-inch.
The blade, or is it the knife?
And is it the blade plus the shaft?
The shaft. I mean,
oh man.
There's just, I was reading one of my books the other day, and one of the characters, she plays golf, and she made some like silly sentence using all like golf like terminology, but it was all also innuendo.
Nice.
Like we're gonna do something on the back nine and get it in the hole, and like choke up on the shaft, and and she's like, oh, golf is the dirtiest sport for that reason. I'm like, kind of like geology is the dirtiest science. They're all about cleavage and luster. And oh gosh, and then there's where we're talking about our metamorphic rocks, we talk about some really nice schist, and that's GNEISS, nice schist.
Okay.
Gneiss and schist are 2 different types of metamorphic rock.
Okay, I sure believe you on that. Okay, well, back to this very serious story.
It's about aliens, man. I'll never take these episodes seriously.
This one, listen.
It's not because I don't believe that aliens exist. I don't know if it's not that I believe 100% that they do. I just struggle with the alien encounter stories. For a lot of reasons, but it would be arrogant to think that in this vast universe of which we know
very little,
a lot, but we know
we really don't know that much.
Very little. Like,
Yeah.
It's like, as much as we know about the universe, we know that there's so much more we don't know. So yes, it would be arrogant and foolish to think that there's no possibility of life elsewhere.
Yeah. And this story, I will say that, like, if you do believe any of it, it's pretty fucking scary. So, like, just
well, yeah, apparently they've got, like, supersonic Xanax that they can just put out into the air after they've paused.
Oh, don't worry. That's the least scary thing about them. It's just... Okay, so this craft travels towards them for about 15 minutes. They said they could see, I say they, Terry said that he could see the shadow that it cast as it flew over the forest. And when it was close enough to see clearly, which was still, I think he said he thought it was about 3,000 feet in the sky. Terry described it as being about the size of a city block and being about 5 stories tall.
Oh, dang.
Yeah. Your next picture
That's big.
Is a drawing he did of it. I will say I felt like they spent way too much time describing what the actual craft looked like, and that's the least interesting part of the story. But there's a picture in case you care. So from this craft comes a beam of light that is about 6 inches in diameter, and it shot directly down from the craft into their campfire. And it stayed there for a few seconds, and then it disappeared. And then a thin blue laser shot down, and it would, like, kind of shoot into all different, like, it wouldn't move, but it would, like, shoot at you and then disappear and then shoot over here. Yeah.
It was like it was almost taking measurements.
Yeah, and he said it was like it was scanning them. Mm-hmm. He did say that when it landed on him, he didn't feel anything, so it wasn't like whatever.
It was just the light shining on him.
Yeah, just a little light show. And after about 10 minutes, Toby said, "Show's over." And Toby went into the tent and, like, fell face down on his air mattress and went to sleep immediately. And Terry said he did the same thing because that sedation feeling suddenly started to feel like sleepiness.
Mm-hmm. He just started feeling heavy.
Yeah, so he follows him in there. They both just immediately go to sleep. So when Terry wakes up, which later they determined had about 4 hours had passed, he wakes up and there are yellow flashing lights outside of the tent. And they're really bright and they're flashing at irregular intervals. And once Terry kind of, like, oriented himself and remembered that he was camping, he thought, oh, this must be the park ranger. It must be his truck. He's probably come to kick us out because clearly we're, camping illegally. Mm-hmm. So he starts to get up and he notices that his boots, because they fell in their mattresses.
Literally walked into the tent.
Yeah, fully clothed. He noticed that his boots had been unlaced almost completely. So, like, I'm assuming what he means is not, like, untied, but, like, the laces had come out. Mm-hmm. And he knew that he hadn't put them on like that because he was in the Air Force, and he's like, it was a tripping hazard, and, like, I just never did that. And he was like, he said at the time he was just, like, annoyed that he had to, like, fix his boots. So he took them off to fix them and noticed that his socks were on sideways. So he's like, okay, weird. So he's, like, fixing his shoes and socks, and he looks over and he notices that Toby's awake, and Toby is looking out of the tent flap. And he said during one of the flashes of light, he could see that Toby had been crying. And this is the point in the story where I'm like, uh-oh, a boy is crying. Bad. bad. Like when your dad cries, no. So Terry, he's like, what is wrong? And Toby puts his fingers to his lips to say, like, be quiet. And so Terry goes over and looks out the tent flap also. So he sees this craft that they had seen before. It's now floating about 30 feet above them. So it has lowered significantly. and it's in the center of the meadow. And he said it was like right where I wanted to camp. So like, good thing Toby had that weird idea to camp not in the middle of the field. So it's in the middle, and he said that there's like 12 to 15 children who were just like walking around in groups of 2s or 3s. He asked Toby, he's like, why are there kids out here, like all the way out here? And like, what are these kids doing?
Toby's like, those aren't kids.
Take a drink, because Toby says, those aren't kids. He said, they're not human. Don't you remember? They took us and they hurt us. So Terry, he would describe, like, he said they looked like children because they were about 3 feet tall. And he said when he actually looked at them, he noticed that they walked kind of with a weird gait, almost like with a limp. And when he really looked, he noticed, oh yeah, their limbs weren't really proportionate to their bodies. Their heads were larger, and they all looked the same. So it wasn't like a bunch of different kids. It's all the same thing. And later he describes, like, he'll refer to them as the Greys. So I assume they kind of look like the classic Greys. But he thinks, and I don't know how much, I don't know exactly all the reasons he has for this, but he either thought then or would later think that they were not like sentient beings, that they were, he said manufactured, but another explanation I heard was like
Attack of the Clones.
Yeah, like they were, if they were at one point sentient beings, they were being controlled by something else. Like they weren't, I don't know. So they're walking around, and he said all of a sudden a column of light appeared from the bottom of the craft. It was about 30 feet in diameter, and it was like a white kind of
tractor beam.
Yeah, exactly. And he said the beings started to walk towards it. They would step into the light, and they would like dissolve, like in Star Trek. And once they had all been beamed up, he said the craft took off, but not like a rock, like it, he said it basically lifted off like a hot air balloon, and they watched it
just elevated and then
and they watched it get further and further away until they couldn't see it. So they're now alone, but like freaked out. They don't have that nice sedation anymore. And Terry was like, I know it doesn't make any sense, but I don't want to leave this tent. I want to stay in the tent at least until morning. I just feel like I've got more cover here. And Toby was like, F that, we need to leave right now. So they run to the car. They leave everything behind. I think they grabbed their wallets, and that was it. And they luckily found their way out of the park because they're in the middle of nowhere. And they just immediately start driving. They're 6 hours. Another reason not to camp 6 hours from home. They have a 6-hour drive back to base. So Terry said he was extremely thirsty. He said he'd never been this thirsty before in his life. His joints were sore, and he said his and Toby's eyes were swollen, like couldn't hardly see anything. They stop at a gas station, the first gas station they find. Terry goes inside, and in the bathroom he sees that his skin is like red, like he's been sunburnt, just every inch of him. And they stop and they buy like, I'm trying to remember, they don't buy water, they buy like, I don't know, grape juice or something. They buy some, like, not, I don't even think Gatorade had been invented, but like they're not buying like sports drink, I don't think. They're just buying like flavored drinks. They buy their drinks and they're like pounding them down in the car. And he said that Toby seemed to be worse off than him. The way he put it was like, whatever they did to me, they did double to Toby. So he just seemed like he's like, Toby wouldn't have been able to drive. Like he was just worse. So eventually they get back. They both end up going to the hospital, which is where they work. And Terry was like, I knew everyone there. So like a little embarrassed. Terry had a 103.8 degree fever. Both of them they found out that they were suffering from flash burns. So corneal burns, like a welder's arc burn. They were both treated for acute dehydration and the burns on their bodies. Terry, I wish he had called his friend something else because I'm getting confused with Terry and Toby. Terry said that he had these circular dots that were like insect bites all over his body. But he said they had used military grade DEET, so he wasn't.
I've used that before. or rather, just government issued bug spray.
Yeah. So he's like, I don't know how I could have gotten that bitten.
I mean, the stuff that we used, we had to spray on our clothes and let it sit out in the sun for a little bit before we could put them on.
Oh, okay. Maybe that was it. He did say they healed quickly, and he remembered hearing a Geiger counter being used. He said his eyes were too either swollen or sensitive to the light to actually open and look to see what was going on. But he heard the Geiger counter, and he's like, he recognized that he had symptoms of radiation poisoning. It's unclear if there was any radiation that was detected, but I don't know. So, while he's in the hospital, the Office of Special Investigation comes to visit him, the OSI. And they were, surprise, not nice. They asked him why he had abandoned his campsite so quickly. And, like, the idea was, I think, that however their campsite was come upon, they had, like, it was like Toby had his name and address written on his backpack, and they had, like, government or Air Force hospital blankets that, like, they knew who they were. So they're like, you know, why did you abandon this campsite? He said one of them accused him of growing marijuana out there, and he's, like, confused because he's like, was someone growing marijuana out there? And we were, like, camping nearby, and, like, are we in trouble for something? Because you're acting like we're in trouble.
The worst thing we did was camp off the beaten path.
Yeah.
Like, that's the biggest law that they broke, was some trespassing, basically.
Yeah.
Which, you know, like, yeah, don't
trespass.
Don't do that.
He said they made him sign several waivers without explaining what they were. And he said he signed them without reading them.
Of course.
He does fess up to that.
Well, I mean, he could hardly open his eyes or focus.
Yeah, it's true. And I kind of get the impression that, like, if these people tell you to sign something...
Mm-hmm. He's also 22.
He's 22. Yeah,
he's also been in the military for several years.
Mm-hmm.
If you've been in the military, like, by that point, it is ingrained in you that when someone tells you to do something, you just do it.
Yeah, especially, like, an officer, which I think these both were.
This isn't just a superior officer. This is an officer in a suit.
Yes. This is a special officer.
This is a suit. A suit tells you to do something. You're like, oh, okay, yes, sir.
Yes. So one of them told him that they knew he and Toby saw something. He said, we know that you saw something. You know that you saw something. All we want to know is how many pictures you took of it and where the film is. Because Terry was, like, an amateur photographer. But he said, ironically, he had forgotten to bring his fancy camera. Like, that was at his house. And the only camera they had was Toby's, which was, like, just a regular camera. Mm-hmm. And they hadn't even taken it out. Like, they hadn't even thought to use it.
They were too busy hiking and exploring and enjoying camping for the first time.
Yeah. And Terry tells him that. He's like, I'm not taking
also,
pictures.
When you notice, like, something weird is going on, you're like, I'm gonna observe and, like, figure out what's going on. And you're like, your first thought is not usually, I need to photograph this.
And, like, maybe it is today because we have, like, cameras in our pockets all the time.
And the society's obsession with social media. But, like, you saw all the pictures that I took this weekend. Mm-hmm. There was very few. And I have a freaking adorable kid. And he does hilarious and adorable things. He is a handsome boy. And I took very few pictures because I was just too busy enjoying my time with him. Yeah. Like, and again, that just might be a me thing too. Like, I've never been big in the whole social media, take pictures, share my whole life
Well, did you take pictures of the alligator that was stalking your camp that one time?
The only thing my phone was being used for that night was to Google information about alligators to hopefully rule out that it was an alligator. I was trying to tell myself, like, there's no way it's an alligator.
Yes.
But just in case, what should I do?
Yes. But, like, point being, you were focused on what was happening, not on taking a picture of it.
Yeah. Understanding the situation.
Yes. Yes. So these guys tell Terry, they're like, okay, well, you are to have no contact with Toby. You just can't talk to him. And, like...
Yeah, we don't want you guys to corroborate your story.
Yeah, we don't want you to talk about it. And apparently Toby was, like, pretty quickly reassigned to Japan. And Terry only saw him one time after the incident. It was right before he left for Japan, and Terry essentially was like, I want to say goodbye to my friend before he moves across the world.
Yeah, and also be like, are you okay? Like, have you recovered from this experience?
Yes. Toby had not. He said that Toby looked terrible when he saw him. He said he looked unkempt. He smelled like he had been drinking, and he said that was all very unusual for Toby. And the only thing that Toby said to him was, it really happened, didn't it? And Terry was like, yes, it did. Like, you're not crazy. Yes, it happened. Like, I wish we could talk about it. Sorry. He did get in trouble for, disobeying an order. And then
there's some things that are worth breaking orders for. I would agree. 100%, if nothing else, to literally just be like, are you okay?
Yeah. And
that you can do a yes or no. Like, you don't have to have a whole conversation. You can say, yes, I'm okay, or no, I'm not. But
and and also, this is his best friend, and I think this is literally the last time he ever sees him. So, like, good call, Terry. Like, break the order, go say goodbye to your friend.
Some rules are meant to be broken.
So 5 weeks after the camping trip, the OSI calls Terry in, and they were like, guess what? One of the forms you signed was consent to be hypnotized. So we're going to do that now. So they gave him sodium amytal.
Truth serum, even though it's not really truth serum. It's just it relaxes you without knocking you out, kind of a thing. Kind of like, all those funny videos of people after getting their wisdom teeth out.
Yep.
It makes them, they talk, but they're also, like, loopy and out of it. This is like that, but
with, like,
you're not
breathing exercises.
You're not loopy. You're not talking about, like, the spiders dancing on the wall over there.
Yeah.
You're doing a tap dance, and they all have canes. Like, you're not hallucinating things.
Yeah. And, like,
you're just like, ask me
I will
anything.
say that, like, hypnotism and, like, recovered memories via hypnotizing is, like, pretty controversial. And, like, I know there's been a lot of studies to prove that, like, you're essentially implanting memories rather than recovering them. So, like, take it with a grain of salt, I guess.
The most information I've ever really heard or learned about, hypnosis and, or in instances like this is more, I was in high school, and it was my speech class, or my drama teacher would tell fun and interesting stories like this often. And there's one where we talked about hypnosis, specifically in someone interviewed different, like, serial killers, I believe, or, like, just really bad criminals, and brought them back and, like, kind of talked through their childhood and whatnot, and how, and, like, kind of the purpose of it was talking about how there's crucial milestones for development. Like, you have to crawl. Like, babies always put things in their mouth. Like, that's how they understand, and, like, you start to understand the world around them is by putting things in their mouth.
Yeah.
We all know babies put things, like, we all know and do, but apparently, like, this one kid, his mother was a super germaphobe. would never let him put anything in his mouth and was like always intervened. So he was never allowed to, you know, explore and start to understand the world that way. And then I think there was another person who kind of a similar germaphobe thing. Like, he was basically never allowed to crawl. He went from sitting to walking. And so there's just, you know, it was a couple of instances that by using hypnosis, they were able to go back to their childhood and discover that they missed out on these, you know, childhood development milestones. And I don't know if it was ever like a conclusive thing, because again, this was like in high school, and this was a teacher telling me and not presenting me like facts and stories and information. She's like, she didn't end the lecture with, and here's a handout of all my sources. But I think it was one of those, like, we're not saying this is why they became a criminal. It could have been other multiple factors throughout the rest of their childhood. But this is also why these developmental milestones are important to let children have.
Yes.
So yeah, I guess moms let babies put things in their mouth.
I was trying to look up, I swear there's a documentary I watched about like the lady who did that, like the psychiatrist who did that. I don't know what it's called. But there's definitely some kind of true crime documentary about a woman who, I think she uses hypnosis and essentially goes back to find
what went wrong.
Yeah, like what went wrong, because her theory was no one's born evil. Something happens to make you this way. And it was like she had this like really solid hypothesis and study going, and then she met Ted Bundy and he kind of fucked everything over. He's like, oops, I think actually you maybe were born evil. Sorry. Like, JK.
Born wrong.
Yeah, oops.
Because, I mean, yeah, and, like, I would love to also believe that nobody is born evil, and that it's, you know, a traumatic event or a series of wrong turns that led them.
I believe that I think that, like, 99% of people are not born evil. But I do believe in, like, psychopathy as a mental illness.
Yes.
And I do think those people, to no fault of their own, but were born evil.
Yeah. And I mean, again, there's different levels of evil, I guess is the best way to say it. Because I think we've talked about before, too, that, like, a significant number of, like, CEOs and, like, high-level business people like
who are technically psychopaths
tend to be psychopaths. Yeah. And like it's that psychopathy that makes them successful in business because, you know, they're like, this is the goal and this is like these are the ways to achieve the goal, and they don't care about you know, who they hurt metaphorically, I guess.
Yeah.
To get there. And so like that works for them.
Right.
And so I guess like yeah, like being a psychopath, I guess, isn't bad.
But there are also psychopaths who are also like sadists.
Super bad. And they're like,
and that's a lethal combination.
They don't care who they hurt, literally.
Yeah. I watched,
and also, I guess, enjoy hurting people.
Yeah. I watched way too much of that Signs of a Psychopath show. I think I watched the whole series. But the two that really like really fucked me over was Israel Keys, which we did an episode on. He if you want to sleep, do not listen to his interviews. He is the coldest, most heartless, like he's evil. He's horrifically evil. And then there's a woman who murdered a man for essentially no reason, but the way that she talks about her crimes also are very like very Israel Keys, very like it was funny, it was hilarious, I did this and then I, you know, drove nails into his head, and it just not good. maybe y'all shouldn't watch that show. Just watch the Last Stars show and admire the beautiful man that plays Nicholas II, who, not the actor Nicholas II, apparently was very anti-Semitic, so not great on that. That's why I want to be specific. Look at the actor. He's very beautiful.
Yeah.
Don't idolize the historical figure. Okay, back to hypnotism. It'll just get bad in a different way.
Oh, yay. We're all out of wine. Have you texted Jarek yet?
You know what? Let me do that real quick. My phone is right here.
Hey everyone, it's Hannah. I wanted to quickly ask if you are enjoying the podcast, please leave us a 5-star review. It goes a long way in getting the show in front of other listeners. If you listen on a platform that doesn't do reviews, please follow us on social media, like the show, or leave a comment. Thank you. We love you guys, and we hope you enjoy the show.
So Terry knew that he couldn't be hypnotized against his will. Like, he knew enough about hypnotism to know that, like, you kind of have to be a willing participant in it.
Yeah, even if you've signed a document saying that, like, yeah, you can hypnotize me.
Yes.
You have to be open-minded to the experience.
Yes. So he purposefully was not, he pretended he was, but he purposefully, like he said he kept his mind occupied. Like, he would try to do, like, math problems or, like, sing Beatles songs, or, like, he would just do the opposite of what they were telling him to do while looking like he was complying.
Yeah, like, all right, you know, now you're at the campsite.
Yes.
Look around you. And he's like,
I'm in this room.
I'm in a shopping mall. How many tiles are on that ceiling?
Exactly.
Red, yellow, leather.
Okay. So Terry's fighting this hypnosis, but possibly because of the drugs, he does still end up, quote, recovering some memories. So first thing is that they ask him, they're like, you saw this, whatever, but they weren't really stars. What were they? Who were they? And he says, oh, they're the star people. And he said he recognized that, like, he just said that. He hadn't, consciously made it up. But he also realized that this was not the first time he had met the star people. He had met them in his childhood. And that they used to come and take him when he was little. So he remembers being 4 or 5 and being taken onto a ship with other children around the same age.
Actual children or the Greys?
Actual children. And there was a woman there, and he always called her Sue because she reminded him of an Asian woman that lived in his neighborhood.
Miss Sue.
But he described her as just like a very petite woman, possibly an alien human hybrid, unclear. Also possibly just like an alien who's like cloaking itself to look human and just not doing a great job.
Like that alien from American Dad, but like wearing a wig and stuff.
Yes, that actually is what I was picturing.
First place my brain went.
Roger with a wig.
Yes, Roger with a wig.
So when he was taken on these little trips with other children, they were given like tasks to do, and he said like geometric whatever, I don't know.
Solving puzzles.
Yeah, solving puzzles. And Sue was kind of like their supervisor. He said there's also another girl there who was about 12, and she was like older than the rest of the kids, and she was kind of like a helper to Sue. And he said she wore a 1940s style dress, and like a dress that a child would wear in the 40s. Black shoes with socks, and she had pigtails. And Terry remembers being very scared of her, and that the other kids were scared of her too, but she wasn't doing anything.
She wasn't intimidating.
Yeah.
It's just her presence was like, you don't belong here.
Yes, it was very much like something's off. Like he was like, she wasn't mean or like strict or anything.
Or ominous. Or...
Yeah, it was just like we were scared of her. And he remembered communicating telepathically with Sue, and maybe with the other children, but he said he asked one time why can't we talk like this at home, like in our heads? And Sue said, because you're not ready. So that's just his childhood. The OSI does not care about that necessarily. They want to know what happened in Devil's Den.
I had theories. And now I still have theories. Because, the whole, like, the night of the incident story, I'm just like, okay, I have thoughts. I have theories. And then you're talking about, like, their, like, radiation poisoning, similar symptoms. I'm like, okay, no, still maybe fits in. Or, like, I can adjust some of my theories to maybe include this. All right, keep going.
Yeah. So Terry, I think through a series of hypnotherapy sessions, I don't know, he has recovered like pieces. He says he doesn't have a full memory of what happened, but he's got he called them little vignettes of like what happened. So
honestly, I feel like this is probably worse to do because, like as we've talked about before with memories, every time you call on a memory,
it changes.
It changes a little bit. Like you don't remember it exactly the same way every time. And now by adding this hypnotism and especially if you're doing like through repeat sessions, these other memories, also again drug induced memories, I'm gonna throw up some air quotes there, are also probably altering how he views the actual memories of the incident. And are now coloring what he actually experienced.
And I will say that he seems to be aware that like a lot of what he alleges happened seems ridiculous. Like there's things where he's like, that book I said, Incident at Devil's Den, is a book he wrote. And so there were a lot of things where he's like, I almost didn't put this in the book because I know it sounds just like completely made up, but it's what I remember. So, and that's also like why I think it's important to mention his, not credentials, but like what he ended up doing with his life, because it's not like he had this incident and then he became like the Ancient Aliens guy who's just like
memories are just so fickle and fragile and like there's still so much we don't understand about how our brain absorbs and processes and stores and recalls information. Like there's still just so much we don't know, and this is a issue that I think of a lot, especially anytime I tell a story about when I was little and living in Singapore. So I was,
none of that happened.
Photographic evidence and video evidence, and I've got letters.
I've never seen any of that, so
I have the letters at home. You have seen pictures. I sent you a picture of me in Thailand as a child.
Really?
Yes, and I was like, doesn't this look exactly like Walker?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, that
and maybe I didn't send. I think I might have
any...
actually showed you the physical photograph.
Could have been anywhere.
Like... Anyway.
Sorry.
So
I'm trying to gaslight.
There's certain memories that I have of our time living in Singapore, and I was like 2 going on 3, or like I think I maybe like just turned 3. We got there, I had just turned 3, and then I don't know, as we left before I turned 4. And we did a lot of traveling and did a lot of different things, but there's certain memories I have of things like our apartment, Christmas, swim lessons at my school, the market, some of our travels to like, New Zealand and stuff. And, I've always, every time I think about these things, I wonder, I'm like, okay, how much of these are my actual memories? And how much of this is a combination of stories that I have been told, as well as pictures or videos that I have seen, because I have seen both pictures and videos of me like on the stage of a sheep shearing show feeding a baby lamb. And I'm like, okay, I think some of the memories of me doing that are definitely just the stories that people have told me. But there's other parts of that, like other aspects of those memories that I'm like, no, I I remember like a firsthand point of view.
Yeah.
And then there's other parts of the sheep shearing show that I remember that nobody has told me about and there's no pictures of.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I don't know if that's my memory filling in the gaps, or not my memory, but like my brain filling in the gaps.
Yeah.
Or if I actually remember it. Recently, my uncle visited and he brought me a big tub of junk that he cleared out from his mother's house, my grandmother, or sorry, my grandboo. And in that tub o' junk is a whole mess of like the letters and other stuff that my mom sent, or my parents, like they would do like a form letter.
Mm-hmm.
And so it'd be like this one long multi-page letter about like, well, what's been going on in our travels in Singapore.
Yeah.
And they would send it to all of the family. Like, you know, so they weren't writing like 12 different letters every,
like the Christmas letter
every
my
couple of
parents
weeks.
send out every year. Yeah.
Yes. It's a form letter and they would send that out, you know, every month or so. I don't remember how often. But in it, there was a couple of the letters that I've read that I think my mom wrote most of them, and every now and then my dad jumped in, and it's actually really interesting to see the different writing styles. But she would be writing and describing something that I'm like, I vividly remember this.
Mm-hmm.
And there's one story that has always stuck with me. And I'm like, has someone just told me this? Or do I remember it? And I felt kind of vindicated when reading about this in the letter. That, you know, I was learning Mandarin when I was at the school.
Mm-hmm.
And so I remember, you know, obviously, ni hao, xie xie, hello, and thank you.
Mm-hmm.
But then, pingqua and butao is apple and grapes. If I remember properly, I do know that pingqua is apple.
Okay.
And actually, butao might be a different thing. I always think it's grapes. Anyway, I have this memory of, you know, Mom picking me up from school and me telling her that I learned this today, and or I don't remember exactly, but we went to the market after school, and I was like, Mom, I want an apple, but I want to order it.
Aww.
So we went up to a fruit stand, and I remember going up to the counter and just saying, pingqua. And that's all I remember of that story.
Okay.
But my mom wrote about it in a letter that she picked me up from school, and I was very excited to tell her about how I was learning Mandarin, and, you know, I wanted to order an apple, and she described it in even more detail than I remembered, and I was like, I do remember this. But at the same time, I'm like, maybe this was a story that she told me, though.
Yeah, it doesn't hurt anyone for you to just keep believing it's your own memory.
Yeah. Memories are messed up, though.
Memories are messed up. And speaking of, here's some messed up memories that I'm going to tell you about. Okay, so these are the pieces that Terry says he remembers about that night. So, first thing he remembered was being inside possibly the ship. He said the interior where he was seemed a lot bigger than the ship he saw, so he's not sure if they took them somewhere else or if the ship was just like the TARDIS and was bigger on the inside. He described it more as like a medical building than a craft. He said the interior lights were super, super bright, but there weren't any light fixtures. And he thinks that that's what gave them their corneal burns, was just like the really, really bright lights inside.
Maybe the walls were the lights.
Right? That's kind of what I'm thinking. So he said he opened his eyes and he had been undressed and he was holding his clothes and his boots like in a bundle. He couldn't move anything except for his eyes. And he said those smaller beings that they had seen outside that he thought were children were just kind of moving all over the place, just being busy.
Drones.
Yes. To his left, he could see a row of flying discs lined up, I guess, like vehicles that they were going to take out. He said there were multiple levels to the structure that he was inside. There were vehicles that were like golf carts, but they didn't have wheels, and they moved around like carrying the little grays everywhere.
Hoverboards.
Yeah. Then he said he could hear a woman screaming. And he said, there's different kinds of screams.
Mm-hmm.
And he said this woman was screaming in pain. He didn't know where she was. And then to his right, he could see nearly a dozen humans. But he said these were all men, women, and children. And they were all, he's like, for whatever reason, me and Toby were like separated from them. And they were all over on this side.
Because obviously Terry was one of their previous subjects.
Obviously.
According to his childhood memories.
But he said they all also appeared to be paralyzed, only able to move their eyes. And he said they were very clearly in distress. They were all crying. He said he thinks that they must have been there like when him and Toby were picked up. And one of the things that's always bothered him the most about this whole thing is that he doesn't know what happened to them. He doesn't know if they were like taken back or whatever. At some point, he became aware of a 6-foot tall being that was not one of the Greys. He said it was dressed in a gray uniform with a V-neck sweater, fashionable. He said it wasn't gray. Its skin was more of a chalky pink complexion, but it was definitely not human. It had 2 nostrils and a slit for a mouth and no ears and no hair. He said the eyes weren't as big as the Greys, but they were still almond shaped and they were about the size of a pair of Ray-Bans. And that they also kind of wrapped around the head like a pair of sunglasses.
Sounds like something off of Star Trek.
Yeah, it does a little bit. He even said too that he thought maybe he had a theory that possibly their eyes weren't really that huge, but that they were sunglasses because everything was so bright. So he sees this thing. It walks across his field of vision from right to left. He said it carried itself like an officer of some kind. And then it happened to look at Terry and make eye contact with him. Like it was like Terry was looking at it and then it looked back at him. And Terry also said that this is like the scariest thing that happened. He said when that being looked at him, it was inside of his head. And he's like, it knew everything about me. It knew my life. It knew who my wife was. It knew all of my secrets. It knew all of my dreams. It knew like
Terry was married at 22?
Yes, Terry was married, and he's still married to that same woman.
Oh, that's delightful.
I know.
I love the little wholesome bits that we get in the middle of our terrifying.
In the middle of terror. Yep, he was married. Toby was also married, but that's not relevant. But he's like, this thing just knew everything about me. And he said, I felt so inferior. And the only thing that I got back from looking at him was just that he was so superior, like so much more intelligent. Mm-hmm. And this is when, in that UFO podcast, when he mentions his cat that's been making all the noise, he said, it was like, when I look at my cat will like mirror back to me, like whatever, like,
I'm sorry. This man thinks he's smarter than a cat.
Maybe a cat wasn't the best
I mean,
metaphor.
I look at any other animal, I'm just like, you've got your own like knowledge and whatnot. There's very few animals that I look at that I'm like, you are so dumb.
Okay, well, let's change his metaphor. Maybe he's looking at what's a dumb animal? I mean, some
humans.
Dogs. Scooby. He was looking at Scooby, my old foster dog.
Scooby was not dumb. He was
and Scooby was
goofy.
Looking back, but one eye was looking the other way. Scoobert.
Hey, we can't make fun of physical differences.
I love that dog so much. Okay, so back up to our spaceship.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so besides this scary, all-knowing being, Terry also saw about 8 people, like humans, between 18 and 22 years old, wearing tan flight suits and combat boots. And he said they were definitely human.
Space Force.
That's what I thought. I was like, Space Force. I'm of the belief that a lot of aliens are like time travelers. which I love. So he said that they were definitely human. They seemed like crew members. He said there's 7 men, 1 woman. They all had military style haircuts, and they had a reddish orange patch on the left shoulder. So everyone remember that whenever Space Force comes out with some stuff. He said he couldn't see what was on the patch. He just knew that like that insignia was not like at the time a military thing.
He didn't recognize it as.
Yes. And he said later on in life he had a friend who offered, I guess a friend / psychiatrist who offered to do a hypnosis session on him to see if he could recall what it was. And he did, but he said in that memory they were still too far away for him to see what it was. So he remembers the Greys came and took Toby away, and after that he heard Toby screaming down the hallway, which was not great. And then they took him away down the hallway. As he's being taken away, he could see what he described as fish aquariums of various sizes. And he said in one of them was what looked like a puppy, but like just in the way that it was like wrinkled. And I guess just like puppy was like the closest. I'm choosing to believe that there was not a puppy up here. But puppy was like the closest thing he could approximate it to. Mm-hmm. He said the water was pink and that there was an umbilical cord coming from the creature to somewhere else. And as he walked by, he saw it open an eye. So it was like definitely alive. When he got to the end of the hallway, he was taken into a white room with a domed ceiling and an exam table. And they put him on the exam table, and he remembered expecting it to be cold, but it was warm, and then realizing it was probably warm because there were other people on it not too long ago. And then a praying mantis-like creature approached, who was apparently the doctor. This creature was described as being very, very tall, very insect-like, which, to be fair, I have heard on And That's Why We Drink about mantis-like aliens. Apparently that's the thing. So it's very tall. It had a triangular head like a mantis and giant multi-lensed eyes like a fly. And he said between each lens there were little fine hairs sticking out, which is kind of gross. So he said the mantis thing was doing...
Wasn't there a drive-in horror movie like The Fly or something like that came out in the 70s?
I don't know when that came out. The one with... I don't know. You look that up while we continue. It did something to his lower back, which he said was very painful, and so he tried to scream, but he's still paralyzed, so he can't scream. But he's like, I guess, screaming in his head. And then apparently the mantis doctor became annoyed by his screaming because it looked at him and it spoke to him telepathically and said, "Why are you screaming? Stop screaming. You know that we don't hurt you. You know that we take you back. Just stop screaming." And then it tapped him on the forehead with its big insect finger and he passed out. And he said they might have told me before that they were going to just like do some stuff and then bring me back, and I forgot, but I don't know. Did you find out when year that movie came out?
The one that I was thinking of, The Fly, starring apparently Jeff Goldblum.
Jeff Goldblum. Yep.
Didn't remember that. 1986. Yeah.
Oh, well.
But I mean, we watched the Bee Girls, and that was definitely a 70s. That was 70s.
They had those big sunglasses / eyes.
So I mean, there was definitely like drive-in horror films that could be influencing his memories.
Yes, the creature features.
I still feel like this, because all of these are descriptions from his hypnosis sessions in 77, right?
Yes, I think so.
So, I mean, I feel like this was big resurgence in, like, alien-based horror movies. Because I feel like in the 50s, there was, you know, like, a lot of, like, sci-fi was talking about going to space and the moon men and the Martians and whatnot.
Yeah.
And so, like, aliens were kind of in vogue as far as, like, sci-fi went. And then I feel like in the 70s when, like, all of the like, campy horror movies and, like, drive-in horror films, I feel like there was a resurgence of alien-based ones. So.
Maybe. So his final memory from the event is being semi-conscious. So Toby's next to him. They're in the field somewhere. And he remembered having the thought, oh, they fucked up. They were supposed to put us back in our tent. And right when he thought that, some greys appeared and carried them back to their tent and tossed them in. So that's his memory of what happened. Apparently after that he went on and like finished his military career and then went on to become a lawyer, etc.
Did he ever try and get, like, what happened to Toby? Is it sad?
I don't know. So all Terry has said is that Toby never fully recovered from the incident. I believe he has passed away. The implication I got was that somehow his death was related. Like, I don't know if he maybe took his own life, or
that's what I kept anticipating you to tell me.
Or
this,
just
like
like
basically this
really
entire
declined.
time.
Yeah, but he definitely said Toby never really recovered from it. So, and then he said something that made me think that, I mean, his health declining could also be his mental health declining. So I think he just kind of downhill from there.
If you're having, you know, really bad mental health problems, that can lead to physical health problems.
Yes. So in 2012, sometime after Terry has retired, he wakes up one day and suddenly he can't put any weight on his right leg. And because of this, he falls. And it's 2012 and he's in his 60s? I don't know. Born in 50. So he's 62? Okay. So when you fall when you're 62, it's sometimes a big deal. So his wife took him to the doctor and he got his leg x-rayed. And in the x-ray, it shows a square piece of metal about the size of a fingernail with 2 wires coming out of it just above his knee. And your final picture is that x-ray. The radiologist who was looking at it was like, okay, well, have you had any surgeries? Like, do you have shrapnel in your leg that I don't know about? And he's like, no, I've never had any surgery on this leg. And he's like, okay, well, you obviously have. And this is about where you would have the scar. And he like points to his knee. And Terry's like, I don't have a scar there. And the radiologist is like, well, you do, but you probably just like forgot about it or something. And he takes out a black light and he looks all over his knee and he can't find a scar. And he said that there's no way of putting that in your knee without breaking the skin, essentially. And he said also in your calf muscle, which was that second picture, there are several tic-tac sized objects and they are arranged into kind of a floral pattern.
I was going to say floral.
Yeah. The radiologist said at least on the x-ray they show up as the same density as bone. And I have no idea what they are. Terry tried after this to find someone who would remove those things from him because obviously his thought is that square piece at least is like a tracker or something. Because he said my first thought was that it had to do with the incident and they had done something to me. But a couple years before this, he had had a heart attack. And so to get surgery, he had to get like a cardiac clearance letter. And he couldn't get a doctor who would give him that for like elective surgery, essentially. So he just like had left it in his leg. And in 2017, which is shortly after he started writing his book, Sue came back to visit. Our little friend Sue. And this is one of the things he said he almost didn't put in the book because he's like, believe me, I know that this sounds like bananas. He said he woke up in his living room in his easy chair and he saw Sue sitting across from him, that she was dressed in all black. She had a skinny neck and a red scarf, and she was wearing a wig, but it was like askew. Like it looked kind of silly.
Again, Roger from American
Dad. Yeah. He said he had that same calm feeling that he got at Devil's Den. He wasn't freaked out. And she spoke to him telepathically again. And one of the things she told him was that it wasn't wise for him to talk about the humans that he saw on the ship. She's like, you just shouldn't talk about that. And he's like, too late. I kind of already put it in my book. And she also warned him that if he talked and like continued doing this, that they were going to come back and they were going to remove the implant from his leg. Like, which was kind of his only like physical proof that he had.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously he didn't listen because he continued with this book, continued with his plans on publishing. 3 weeks after her visit, he woke up one morning and his upper leg was really sore. He said it was like he'd been hit with a baseball bat. He also had like a scar. They called it like a wound. I mean, it looked not like a surgical scar, but there was something definitely there. I should have included that picture. Anyways, he went around trying to get an x-ray, which is hard to do. You can't just like request an
You can't just
x-ray.
walk in.
But he said he eventually found a chiropractor. He was able to kind of like tell him why he wanted the x-ray. And luckily this chiropractor had either had an experience of his own or was just like a believer.
Yeah, sure, why not?
Because he did the x-ray and the square thing was gone. But they left behind or implanted something different because the wire appeared to still be there. And they kind of theorized that it wasn't that they just like didn't take it all, but that they upgraded him to like the newer version of whatever.
Something that was less visible or something that was not visible on human x-ray technologies.
Yes, exactly. He still has the little tic-tac flower thing. He said no one will remove that because it's if it appears to be bone, they're not just going to go remove whatever. And Terry believes that the government is never fully going to admit to everything they know, because that was one of the questions he was asked. He does think that they are now admitting that, or they're not admitting, but they're no longer denying the existence of extraterrestrials. And he says he thinks that this like disclosure that everyone's kind of waiting to happen, like remember when they had the disclosure and it was just like, well, we know that they're out there, but like that's all we're going to tell you. We're going to redact everything else. Right. He says that he thinks is going to come from like a grassroots movement of people, just more and more people coming forward and telling their stories. But that is the story of Terry Lovelace and the incident at Devil's Den. Dun dun dun.
Interesting.
They said this at the beginning. I think of Astonishing Legends, where it's like, you know, take everything with a grain of salt, whatever. But like, if you believe even some of his story is true, then like, it's an amazing story. Because like, in my opinion, I'm like,
for sure.
At the very least, what he saw at the campsite, I think, that's not like a made up. Well, it's not like a recovered memory.
So the thing that is impressive to me about the story is what the human brain does with information that it is unfamiliar with and unprepared for. And so, and also, you know, what the human brain does with memories, again, like just, and again, this is not just normal, you know, or normal hypnosis of, you know, think back and remember this. This was under, you know, this was under some drugs. Like he was, what's the word I'm looking for? Not under duress. It was, what's the word I'm looking for? Come on.
Under the influence?
Influence, yeah. He was under an influence of some other substance. So, like, I mean, we've talked about it multiple times before. Like,
yeah,
you are not in control of your brain. Your brain allows you a certain percentage of its ability, and it's doing whatever it wants to do with the rest of it.
And I kept thinking of George or Hirons, the kid who essentially went to prison for the rest of his life for murders that he didn't commit, because they drugged him without his consent and questioned him. And in that case, I'm like, well, yeah, don't take anything that he says under that as, anything, because you can't, like, legally you can't. But I still want to believe Terry's story. Like,
so do you want to hear my various theories throughout the story?
I was going to say your experience with aliens. Yes, I do want to hear your theories.
So I'm thinking, at first, like at the very start of all of their experiences and whatnot, these are two young men who are inexperienced in camping and the outdoors, and they're sitting around a campfire, yet out there in the wilderness, there are certain plants that you cannot burn without serious negative detrimental effects. So, like, I remember, gosh, I might have been like 12 or 13 or so. It was my first camp out. I was at a summer camp, and, like, yes, there was cabins, but there was also the option of one of the activities being an actual camp out. And, so we did the camp. We all wanted to do the camp out. And, we need to go. Some people were like, okay, well, you guys are in charge of this task. You guys are in charge of this other task. And y'all are, y'all are in charge of firewood. But be careful, like, be sure you don't pick up anything from the rhododendron. And this is a rhododendron because it releases, when burned, it releases noxious fumes. And there's other plants out there, too, that you cannot burn without it releasing noxious or even toxic fumes. And those can result in, like, hallucinogenic type or let's say neurological issues. It can mess up, microphone. It can mess up neurological processes. And then there's also some that will result in physical ramifications, whether like inhaling the smoke or the fumes of a burning plant can like physically harm your lungs and your respiratory system. Also, the smoke can become a physical irritant on your skin. So I'm thinking, I'm like, well, what if these non-outdoorsmen have collected some firewood and are burning some plants that they should not be burning, and that's, causing them to kind of, like, because, how you use smokes to subdue bees.
Yeah.
This smoke has kind of subdued them, and they're just kind of like, okay, I'm done. And that's what sent them to bed. But then talking later about the physical effects, the burns on their bodies, the swollen eyes, I'm like, okay, well, it could also be that still, again, could be burning plants that they shouldn't be burning.
Yeah.
But I'm also thinking they're in a restricted area, and I mean, this is still a state park, right? So this is it's the woods, but it's managed lands. And these flashing lights that they're seeing, that could be some sort of pesticide or some other like gaseous treatment to the area, because it's some other land management technology that is being employed. And part of the reason that that's not an open camping area is because that area is being treated with these harmful toxic chemicals that could lead to neurological and physiological issues.
I like this theory.
And then talking about some of the recalled memories from his childhood through the hypnosis. It could be in the attempt of like fighting the hypnosis and him thinking about anything else, but like still under the influence of this drug. Again, it's similar to the drugs that you take or that you're given before things like your wisdom teeth removal and whatnot, where you are out of it. Like you might speak the truth, but not really, and like. Yeah. And so this might be things that he's remembering that he daydreamed about as a kid, or maybe, again, a kid growing up in the 50s and 60s when sci-fi was really kind of coming into popularity, and things about moon men and aliens and whatnot. Like, he'd probably read some of those, like, dime store books about the Martians, or watched the
melding memories. Like, he could have a memory.
The Twilight Zone episode about something similar.
It's like, you could have a memory, though, of, like, being in a room with a bunch of other children doing tasks.
Yes.
And having a 12-year-old-ish supervisor, or, like, an older kid who scares you. That's a very real thing.
And that's the other thing that I remembered, too, is, like, I remember being in elementary school, and I was taken out of my classroom, and, you know, then I was put on a bus. We went to see a play. We were brought back to the school, and I was put in this classroom with, you know, like, it was, like, 6 or 7 other kids. It was just a handful of us of, you know, around the same age, couple different ages. And we had to, like, write out and draw basically what we saw of the play.
Cool.
And I think I later learned that basically they were testing me for the gifted and talented program.
I was going to say the AG program.
Yeah. And so, and it was, so like, that's the thing with the ADHD is like, yes, we are gifted and talented, but also like when you try and test us for it, we'll probably fail.
It doesn't work. Yeah. Yeah.
And so like, I also remember not understanding at all what was going on at the time, and being like, I have these memories of, and I have so many memories of me being in places and like just ending up. At places. I'm like, how did I end up here? Oh yeah, I think I was friends with someone and we were hanging out, but then her parents had to go to this thing, so I went to this thing with and I mean, that's just life.
Your brain doesn't remember the parts of like you getting there and whatever. It's just you ended up there. So it's also very easy for your brain under the influence of a drug to insert, oh well, they're saying that like I might have been, you know, aliens or whatever. So like, yeah, I remember being here. Yeah, I think probably aliens took me there. They came and picked me up. Like,
you're under a drug and you're like, I'm trying to fight hypnosis, so I'm going to think of random things.
Yeah.
And then you say something like the star people, and they're like, oh, the star people. You know that's what they are. And you're like, yeah. And like, you're under the influence of a drug, a mind-altering drug. Like, so your brain is probably going to just start also making things up about like, oh, well, yeah, the star people.
It's like
I can talk about the star people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. I mean, and who knows what the interviewers were saying, how much they were leading.
Exactly. And it's like, have you met these star people before? And it's like,
or you have met these star people before, haven't you?
Yeah.
Tell us about when you met them. Were you a child? How old were you? 5, 6? Yeah.
You know, giving a person a mind-altering substance and then helping them create a narrative.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I don't have much for the x-rays and whatnot and the later on things.
Yeah. One, I will say it's very interesting because I didn't mention this because I didn't think it was important. But Terry did say, he mentioned not really knowing how to start a fire and that their campfire was essentially a brush fire of like, you know, the way he made it sound was like not necessarily firewood, but just like whatever he could find around to burn. So basically, when you started saying that, I was like, oh, yeah.
It would flame up real fast and then turn down to like embers
Yeah.
real quick, like burning cardboard.
Well, and especially the fact that they didn't discuss it. Like, him and Toby weren't, I guess, I mean, you know, they weren't allowed to discuss it, but if they had, I wonder if they would have had differences in what they experienced, because obviously when you're in the middle of, you know, a hallucinogenic trip or whatever, you do think that the person with you probably is seeing the same stuff as you. You're not sitting down and being like, okay, what are you seeing? This is what I'm seeing. You know, like, so in his mind, they were experiencing it together, but I wonder if they had sat down after the fact and talked about it and compared notes, if it would have been different. Like, if Toby was having a completely different experience than Terry was.
And again, like, if they woke up and it was like still like dark but light enough to see things moving out in the field, you know, if Terry's like, what are those kids doing out there? And he's seeing young children, whereas Toby's seeing like giant rats or something.
Yeah.
Like, those aren't children.
Yeah, what are you
like
talking
they're
about?
seeing two different things. Meanwhile, it's a whole bunch of squirrels or something out foraging early in the morning.
Yeah, it's the park rangers coming to kick you. To kick you out.
But your eyes are like all but swollen shut. Like, how much are you actually seeing?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really interesting theory. I like that. I've very much considered, I don't know how old the either of those interviews that I listened to were, but Terry does say that you can email him and he replies to all of his emails.
And I'm not trying to like discount or discredit.
Yeah, no.
I'm always looking for the, okay, well, what's the other possible explanation for this?
Yeah. Well, also, that explanation is a lot to
easier
my
to swallow.
anxious brain. Yeah, like, it's a lot nicer to think that that's what it could be, rather than there's aliens who, and maybe they've been visiting you and you don't even remember it, and you might have something implanted in your body and they've been tracking you this whole time, and there's also a being that knows every thought you've ever had. Like, it's much...
I feel sorry for that being.
I know. It's much nicer to think, oh, there is an explanation for this, and I'm going to go with that instead of this other infinitely more scary one.
Well, I mean, it's just your conscious brain trying to like re-rationalize what maybe your subconscious has attempted to rationalize. But it's like, I mean, honestly, I feel like there's probably a lot of, you know, like, you're out in the woods, you're not expecting to see anyone, not any flashing lights, nothing flying through the sky, like, you're not expecting any of that.
Yeah.
And again, like, they're camping for the first time, so they might have an idea of what they're gonna encounter out there.
Yeah.
And then so when something else happens, they're like, oh, their brain, probably just jumps to a lot of different possible conclusions and uses whatever previous knowledge that it has, even if it's, knowledge from some sci-fi movie that they've seen recently, and starts trying to connect the dots to understand.
Yeah. Well, and also, and this might not be a great explanation, but like, it was 1977, and it's not like they could immediately look up stuff. So like, I'm thinking of the time that Jarek saw what turned out to be the SpaceX satellite in the night sky, which looks pretty freaky if you ever saw it. I think it's gone now, but like, it was essentially a line of stars just traveling through the sky. He saw that for the first time, freaked the fuck out, thought it was a UFO, like, but we had the benefit of being able to Google that.
Yep.
And then I'm also thinking of when we saw a SpaceX, I don't know what it was. I think we posted it on Instagram. It was like it had to have been the post-separation, and it was whatever was falling back to Earth. But we didn't know that there was a SpaceX launch that night. And after we Googled it and found out that there was, we're like, oh, that's probably that burning thing we saw falling from the sky.
Yeah.
So like, today we have the benefit of being able to kind of look up anything happening around the world or in our area immediately.
Yeah.
And at that time, they didn't have that.
So I'm not trying to dismiss or minimize his experience, and honestly, more importantly, the follow-up experiences, because I feel like, honestly, the I guess multiple hypnosis sessions that he was forced to undergo is probably far more torturous than what actually happened. But again, like, I'm not trying to say that it didn't happen. I'm always looking for the alternate explanations. And because, you know, it was Occam's razor, the simplest explanation typically is the answer. And so, you know, start with the simplest thing and then rule that out. The simplest thing, they picked the wrong plants to burn, and that caused some of their issues. Like, okay, well, rule that out, and then we'll move on to other things.
Yeah.
So, anyhow.
Anyway, thanks for listening.
If you want to see pictures from today's episode, you can check out our Facebook and Instagram. Just search the Tales We Tell podcast. If you want to see the pictures but don't do the social media, check out our website, thetaleswetellpodcast.com. And if you want to support us and get yourself some sweet, sweet swag, you can check out our Redbubble store. Just search The Tales We Tell. We've got several different logos, and you can put that on anything. And if you want to support us in when you don't need the swag or the stuff, sorry, it's been a minute, you can become patrons at patreon.com. Just search The Tales We Tell. You'll just get fun things like, I don't know, early access, commercial-free listening, sometimes some fun bonus content, stickers and love notes, our undying love and appreciation. And honestly, the quickest and easiest and cheapest way to support us is to go check out our YouTube channel. Just YouTube, search The Tales We Tell podcast, and just like and subscribe. And that really helps us a lot. I mean, it's another great way of being able to listen if you're, you know, out of your, I don't know, for some reason you can't listen to us through your normal avenue. You got another one.
There you go.
And also, by liking and subscribing, the more subscribers that we've got, the more of a reach that we've got. So,
So, thanks for listening. We'll be back next week with something else.
Don't know what it is yet, but it'll be something. And I'll be here to tear it all down.
Oh. Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.